Hey everybody, today I want to talk about a numbers game, basically. So, if you're going through a job searching process right now, you know this very well, or if you've done it in the past, like I have, you know this very well. Um, it is an uphill battle to go from searching or applying to get an offer, right? And it can take a lot of effort and a lot of rejections and a lot of time to get to that offer stage, right? So, I would like to give you some numbers so that you get a feel for whether or not you are getting rejections more than normal at different levels, and we'll talk about the levels in a minute here, at different layers, different stages of the interview. So you get some idea of what to expect, what kind of numbers, what kind of rejections that you get. But before that, we also got to I got to show you the different interview stages, so you get an idea of how this goes in the first place. It'll make more sense as I talk about it. So, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. That gets me going. That motivates me to do more videos. So please do that. All right. So first of all, this is like a it's not the best diagram and best PowerPoint, but let's go with it. So at the bottom is where you start, right? You you, you first start with the application, obviously. Then at some point you get some callbacks from the internal recruiters, right? They want to talk to you. Then once you go to that stage, then you go to the hiring. Then generally speaking, you get to talk to the hiring manager for an hour or so, right? And that's really the key, because once he or she is passed you on, you get to the other phases. And sometimes you're lucky, especially if it's a contract role, you might even just get one more interview and you're done. Sometimes, especially with large enterprises, these interviews seem to never end. You might have up to 7 interviews, or including coding interviews, before you get to the offer stage. So that it really depends, right? Depends on what the job is and how big the company is. But back to the point. Um, so generally speaking, what I've seen and again, this only applies for DevOps roles. This only applies for technical DevOps roles. This only applies to US only, and this is based on today. It's 2024. Maybe it will change it in the future. So if you're watching this in the future, the numbers may change a bit, right? But anyway, so our end goal is to get that offer, right? Generally speaking, by the time you pass the hiring manager stage, you have more than 50% chance of getting to the offer stage, because the hiring manager is really the key person who's going to pass you on. You are less likely to be rejected after that. It still happens. I want to say maybe 40% of the time that happens. But before that, in the hiring manager stage, I want to say on average, you a hiring manager, if he's interviewing, 3 or 4 people, he or she is passing on one person. Generally speaking, that's true, right? If Sometimes when I've interviewed people, it can be up to 5 or 6, and sometimes just two, depending on how how good a candidate I was looking for, right? So it depends, and they won't tell you that. So you might get rejection because the expectation is higher than normal, right? Anyway, I digress. Now the recruiters. So we're going backwards, right? The recruiters, and I'm going to go back the other way because this makes more sense going to the top first. Recruiters generally don't hold you back. They've already looked at your resume. They think it's a good match. They do general some kind of screening. A lot of times it has nothing to do with technology. Although I've had recruiters who's asked me technical questions as well, but that's really rare. But generally speaking, if you got to the internal recruiter, there's 80-90% chance that you're going to get to talk to the hiring manager, right? Now, this is the most surprising part. You really got to pay attention to this. In my lifetime, what I've seen, or lifetime, in the last several years, let's say, or even when I am reviewing resumes and application, generally speaking, there's just 7% or so, somewhere between 5 and 10% positive response rate, right? So if you submitted 100 applications, you should expect to hear from expect to get a positive response from an internal recruiter within 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a time delay here, right? You don't hear back right away. Sometimes you get in a couple of days, sometimes you get in 4 or 5 weeks. So average 2 to 3 weeks. When I was an engineer, my response positive response rate was about 7%, right? Somewhere between 5 and 10. 10 is pretty darn high. That means for every 10 applications you're putting in, you're getting a positive callback. That's pretty high. But if you're getting less than 5%, that means you're not getting a callback 1 out of 20. Then you really got to think about your resume and how it looks, right? So now let's go back the other way. So if you were putting in 100 application, you should expect to get 7% positive callback from the recruiters. Once you get to the recruiter level, 80-90% chance that you're going to get to talk to the hiring manager. By the way, I'm talking about internal recruiters, meaning if it's a third party staffing company, that's totally different numbers. Much lower rate. If you get to the hiring manager, you have maybe 1 in 3 or 4 chance to get to the later stages. And generally speaking, if you get to the later stages, you have maybe about 60% chance of getting to the offer stage. Now, if your numbers are lower than this, then what do you do, right? For example, if you are getting less than 7% positive responses even after 2-3 weeks, you really need to look at your resume and see how it's matching the jobs that you're applying to, because that's what they're going with, right? Then, if you are getting stopped at the recruiter level, that's kind of funny, because really it should not be happening. It may be how you're speaking or something, maybe it's because of H1 or something, but generally speaking, something is really off in terms of what the recruiter is asking for, and what the job requirement was, and what the resume was, and what you put in the resume. The recruiter saw something funny when he or she talked to you. Otherwise, he or she should be passing you on. Now, hiring manager interview, he or she is looking for the whole gamut, right? He or she is looking for your technical skills, your way of talking, are you going to be toxic to the company or not? Are you a good match culturally? He or she is looking at the whole picture. He's also looking at, and this is important, he or she is going to pass you on to 1 or 4 different people. So he or she is going to invest a lot of time from the company to talk to you. So this is why this phase is the hardest. You have 1 in 3 or 1 or 4 chance of getting past the hiring manager. Then you get to the later stages where you might have coding interviews, or you might have culture interviews, behavior interviews, or you might have technical interviews that's not coding, so on and so forth. And then you get to the offer stage. So my calculation today is that it takes about 130 applications to get to an offer. If your experience is different, please let me know. But that's been my experience. I hope you found this useful, and I will see you in the next video.